This is a 2-year project. It was going to be a 2-month project, but I seem to be medically incapable of doing small projects.
Me too.
The idea was originally, okay, so basically, all throughout COVID, when COVID first happened, I started doing online tabletop gaming. At first, I'd done Dungeons and Dragons, then I'd done Call of Cthulhu, and then eventually we moved on to a more action-orientated version called Pulp Cthulhu. And this is with a few group of close friends. And when I came to chance to do, and I put tons of effort into these, and I would Photoshop the characters together because I told all my friends, pick a famous movie. If you can't think of a character for our games, pick a famous movie actor in a movie you like, and that would be your character. So I would Photoshop all these characters together in posters, and that would be, and I'd have lots of fun with that, and we'd enjoy it. And we'd done this for like a year. And then eventually I'm like, I've got to make a game. So why don't I basically make a video game based on these characters? And that was basically what Quartermain and the Call of Cthulhu became, was my attempt to do a pulpy Indiana Jones-like adventure based on the tabletop gaming characters my friends created. And my original goal was to make something that all my friends could enjoy. It didn't work. I barely talk to them anymore. But I made a cool game. At least I think I did.
Yeah, man. I've been playing, the early build. What are you looking at releasing it now? What's kind of the time frame?
March. Basically, I've got February to just sort out the cutscenes, and then it's just polish.
Yeah, it's good. 6 weeks time to kind of do that QA and marketing push. Put the final shine on it and everything. But anyway, but for the sake of folks listening, I have played a build that is 6 weeks roughly early. And there's still some things. So if I cite any issues, they're probably resolved by the time the audience is hearing this. But yeah, it's really, really interesting. Just kind of the whole business model of working with the easy FPS engine. It's not something that I had ever considered. I mean, I've obviously made quite a dent in the GZ Doom boom, the boomer shooter boom, so to speak. But then Sam had contacted me saying like, hey man, like we have this cool kind of Cthulhu game coming out with DOS Man that you might be interested in. I didn't even know Sam had a fucking video game company. So I was like, sure, why not? And then, I ended up getting connected with you and everything, but the game is neat. It's very simple, obviously, for folks who are fans of like kind of we'll call it boomer shooters for the sake of doing so. For the retro FPS crowd, this is everything that comes out of like the easy FPS engine is going to be very rudimentary. It's essentially like 2D sprites all the way around. Very similar to Wolfenstein in its functionality. It does have room over room stuff, from what I can tell. So that's neat.
It does, but there are other limitations. Okay, so maybe a bit of clarity would be in order for the audience, because they may not know all this stuff. First of all, I just want to clarify, you've not spoken to any other easy FPS editor devs at all.
You are the first person that I have known to have made a game in this engine, unless, of course, someone else had done it and then passed off a game not telling me that.
There are many. I just assumed that they had one of the other devs talk to you at some point. Mm-hmm. Okay, no worries. So for the audience, basically, what is Easy FPS Editor? It is basically, think RPG Maker, but for FPS games. It's an ability to create a specific genre as easy as possible, to the point where you don't really have to do tutorials. So you open it up and you're like, okay, this makes sense. Here is a grid, which is the map. Here is where I draw in the enemies. Here is where I tell them what to do. Simple stuff. It does get a little complex when you go right into the little details of it, but to just pick up, it is one of the easiest game creation tools I've ever known. Yeah, so that's what Easy FPS Editor is. RPG Maker for old Wolfenstein FPS games.
Right. And folks can get a hold of this like through what itch.io is kind of where I started finding at least branches of it. But so it seems like there's been a lot of forks. Do you use a particular one, or do you recommend?
I use Clive Edition, I think, because that's the name of the guy who done the spin-off.
Yeah.
It's okay. I would love to go into some detail on the pluses and minuses. Again, maybe take a second just to fill the audience in. I have mentioned before that I've been on this podcast is the fact that I've been suffering for the last few years from a form of chronic fatigue. I've been very, very tired. So I wanted to make games, but I stopped programming because I suffer from brain fog. I get these moments where I can't think clearly, and I had to give up anything that involved programming. So I wanted to still make something, but I want it to be as easy as possible. Now, you're mentioning like Jay-Z Doom. I don't know how complex it is to use that. Would you describe that as a hard thing to pick up and learn, or was it quite easy for you?
I just want to first acknowledge the fact that as I'm an American and I said GZ Doom, and then you as a Brit would say GZ Doom, and that is hilarious.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's funny. It's funny. And it's true.
Right.
It's right
Okay.
both ways. So yeah. GZ Doom is basically a more modern, updated, community version of the Doom engine.
Trust me, I've spent more hours playing Doom than I've had dinners. But
for the folks listening, like I have to always keep that in mind. Like if someone's tuning in that has no clue what we're talking about, I have to give them some some leeway and some understanding of like what does this even mean? What they're saying all these acronyms. I don't know. It's like being in the military again. But yeah, with the Doom engine, there's been so many games over the past several years that have used it, right? Like Hellforge Studios is a big one where they have, their.
My question was it hard to learn?
I didn't learn it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say to you is that I am in the business of it. I've been on the.
Okay. So I took that as being a dev, is what I thought.
No. I don't look, man. I don't draw shit. I don't code. I can write narratives, but I've been primarily my entire existence in the games industry has been totally on the business side and the project management side. So when it comes to doing the nitty-gritty stuff, level design, I'm an imbecile. You teach me everything you know.
I'm gonna do a little bit of a lore dump on my.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so basically, I've always wanted to make games, but I have one crucial flaw.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. I can't code.
Me too.
Yeah. I've always been heavily dyslexic. I at school had learning disabilities. I was always in a special needs class. I had trouble with that, but I always thought I can make games. I know I can. I can fucking draw for starters. I feel that I can do level design if I just got through that barrier. So when I got on the PC, when I was in my 20s, I was like, I played a little with RPG Maker. The first thing I ever used was RPG Maker on the PS2. Right. And that taught me the basics, but you couldn't really do anything with it because you couldn't give the games to anyone. Right. So I got on the internet and I did want to make RPGs because I know my disabilities. I can't write. I'm not an author, but I thought I could do game design. And I was like, why the fuck are there not programs like RPG Maker, but for other genres? And I found originally a program called FPS Creator, which was made by a British dev company called The Game Creators. And this was back in 2002, 2003, something like that. And it was fucking terrible. It would let you make FPS games, but all the FPS games had very bad enemy AI. And it had terrible slowdown issues. It was badly coded. So whatever games you made, if you had rooms that were too large, the frame rate would fall through the fucking floor. But I made like 6 games with that. One was called The Principality of Mars, which was like a steampunk FPS game. And this is before Bioshock. And there was another one I made called The Tales of Cthulhu, which was Call of Cthulhu inspired. I never played Call of Cthulhu. I just played the video game, which I actually hated, but I liked the idea of it. Dark Corners of the Earth on the original Xbox. Anyway, so I made these games with that. And I gave up on game making because I tried to learn Game Maker and I couldn't do it. I couldn't get my head around code. And then a couple of years after that, I discovered Construct 2. And Construct 2 didn't use traditional code. It used its own proprietary click, and I can't remember the words they used, their own proprietary system for making games that was like coding, but not simpler. I found it okay, still kind of hard, still very buggy. I made a couple of demos and people really liked them. I made on-rail light gun shooters, Pixel Crisis. It was a homage to Time Crisis. I put like 3 months into it and it really took off.
It's really fun.
It had thousands of people play it and I get fan mail to continue it every single fucking day. But every time I respond to them, can't, too tired. Right? I then try to get back into it. My code was such a mess in Pixel Crisis, I started over and I made a Christmas themed game called House of the Bread, which is a pun based on House of the Dead.
Yep.
And House of the Bread is. I know you're talking a second. I'm sorry. I'm skipping my whole backstory more. Right. House of the Bread was a version of like House of the Dead, but it was gingerbread men and elves. And that was also fucking hugely popular. But after like 2 months, I was fucking down and out and I was tired. I didn't want to work on it anymore. And I thought to myself, why the fuck isn't there something like RPG Maker for an FPS game? I want to make an FPS game. And that's when I found Easy FPS Editor. And it is, but when I first got into it, it was buggy. It was shit. It did not work. It crashed all the time. It would corrupt its program files. And fans have come in and they've patched it and they've made it usable. It's not great. But if anyone listening to this wants to make games, but they can't code for whatever reason, be it that they're tired or be it because they're a bit dum-dums like me, whatever, this is a great way to make an FPS game. Because if you can draw, you draw your sprites, you put them in the game, and you can make a fucking game. Okay, there you go. You can talk now.
It's okay. So actually, let's rewind a bit for a couple of different questions here. With this chronic fatigue that you're like suffering from, it's interesting that you get tired of one thing, but you can kind of like find it in yourself to work on something else, but not the thing that you were working on, right? So like
That's because my code is so bad. I would leave notes and I would go back to it after several months. And I wouldn't know what the fuck I'd done. Only God knows how that thing works now.
I think that's why most programmers would, that's why documentation is so important, right? From the project lead side of things, I've definitely dealt with situations.
Thank you, Captain.
No, I am not any better. Look, I took 2 coding classes, and what I learned in both of them was that don't want to do this. That's what I learned, not how to code, but that I don't enjoy it and don't have any. For me, it's not even like I'm not even fucking tired. I'm just bored. I'm like, ugh, dude. And then
I mean, if you have an idea of how bad Pixel Crisis was, it was one single event sheet.
Right.
It wasn't on multiple event sheets. It was on a single event sheet because I didn't finish the course learning how to do it. I started the course, got like 2 hours into it, and then went, I can do this. And then, so yeah.
The availability of tools, like EFPSCE or however you want to, easy FPS editor. It's so hard.
It's a fucking terrible.
Yeah. Instead of that, you have lots of different tools for people who want to make games that don't want to code. I mean, there's even something as simple as like Roblox or whatever. I mean, that you could go crazy. Minecraft provides a lot of these things. Of course, a lot of people have used Unity in this way because there are so many different plugins that you can use. I mean, the entire game, Cultic, my friend Jason, who's been on the show a couple of times, he doesn't know how to code at all. He's essentially, but made one of the best games in Unity. Very, very well selling game. So I'm for these tools in existence. What's that?
Cultic was made with the Duke Nukem engine, wasn't it? The build engine?
No. That's in Unity. Really? Yeah. You should you reach out to Jason and maybe he could like give you some idea of what tools it is that he's exactly using. But yeah, he doesn't know how to code. That guy's he's a gun nut. He knows a lot about guns. He doesn't know shit about computer coding. But
I'm far too British for that. I'm far too British to know a damn thing about guns. But
my point here is that folks all over are making games that don't know and don't have any interest in coding. But what I think is ideal, even if you do have a tool like this, is for a guy like you who's got the creative side of it, the artistic side or the storytelling side or whatever. For a guy like me as well. You just need somebody who's good at coding who, wants to help. So ideally, like the way that we've structured it in the Keep is like, I'm primarily going to be like writing scripts and things like that. Stellar Valkyrie, for instance, I've written, along with my writing partner, Chris, this is what the game is. We put the design document together or whatever. And then, like we just need to find a good coder who knows Doom really well. And then that's, we have someone like Uber who comes in and does that. So I think that some of the conversations you and I have had leading up to this, where we were talking about like, maybe this audio issue or whatever, it could be fixed. And I understand that in your case, it's like the engine is closed source. So maybe it's not as easy to jump in and make edits to, but if you had a good programmer who could like open up, one of the issues that we had pointed out was like, there's no, in your engine, there's no proximal or distance-based change in the audio. So if someone's standing
And
200 yards away from you with a shotgun, it makes the exact same sound in my ear as if they're point blank shooting me in the face with a shotgun.
it is a big problem. It is a big
Yeah.
problem, and I think it's actually open source. The only reason why I said I couldn't do anything about it was because, like I said, I can't code. But no, you're 100%. If we hired a programmer,
Yeah.
we probably could get that fixed. But yeah, it's that. Truth be told, there is a once this project is done in March, it'll be my first completed game since my FPS creator games, and it's the world's my oyster. There's a lot of different things I could do now because, like, you just casually in this conversation mentioned that Cultic was done without coding, and suddenly I played through Cultic. I know it, and my eyebrow was raised in, oh, really? Is that so? You know, that is certainly something I would like to do for a sequel, which I'm already formulating in my mind.
We're already at the early stages of people being basically, being able to open up something like Claude AI or Chat GPT or whatever, and basically tell them like make a game like this, and then just tweak from there. I mean, it's already happening with film, television stuff. So
I I feel like I've been an unnecessary curmudgeon with
yep.
AI. Since I draw, as soon as my friends say, "Oh, look at this AI image" or AI like that, I'm like, "Oh, no, blasphemy! No, no, no!" So I've just sort of completely ignored AI. Uh,
I just
yeah,
I we don't have to get into like the political argument because there really isn't one on my end. To me, it's just like it's a new tool. It's going to be used, and as an analyst of what goes on in the games industry, it is just simply going to be a part of what happens. Like it or not, people are going to use it, and there will be games that that utilize this technology. But forget about how you feel about any particular company or AI system or whatever. The fact is that most of your tools, like most coders today, most of the people who are doing C sharp, C++, whatever, are not actually writing code the way that they did 20 years ago. What they're doing is typing into an editor that is then AI generating all these based on what they're doing. Like, do you mean this? If you're using a search engine, you are using a rudimentary form of AI that's like, do you mean this? Or, here's it's auto correcting based on different things or giving suggestions based on what it's analyzed you're looking at. So that is just a part of game design at this point. There's really no getting around it unless you are, binary coding or something along those lines. I'm sure some programmer out there is going to be a smart ass and be like, actually, blah, according to my calculations, sir. But you get the gist of what I'm saying.
yeah.
Even in your case, like if you're comfortable using a program, right, that has, here's an engine that you just plug in everything you want. Essentially, that's what AI is going to do. In a lot of these cases, it's like, okay, here's a thing. We're going to make inferences based on what it is that you want to do. What is it, linguistically, what are you telling us you want us to do? You input your own, sprites, images. Maybe even people are just saying like, I would like a thing that looks similar to this. And they draw stick figures and it creates something, analogous to that. How they source, the creation of that art is up for debate.
You always get that
Right.
question where it's like, how much is something yours?
True.
So, like, if see, with this game, I didn't code the game, but I did edit the state files, which control how the enemies behave, and I did draw the sprites, which means I would say this game that I've spent 2 years on, that I'm very proud of,
Yeah.
it's about 85% mine. I think if I'm putting a number out my ass, that's what I would say. There is a point though where it's like, how much if you're using AI and other these tools. A good example. A good example. Back in the day, you could use RPG Maker on the PS2 to make an RPG game, but you couldn't change any of the sprites. You just had to use the 3D models it provided, but you could do all the writing. But at the end of the day, how much of that is yours? Because the code isn't yours and the models aren't yours. But anyway, I'm sure I had a point there somewhere.
Well, I mean, how different really is Quartermain from Satan, from space aliens in space, from Flash of the
I
Blade,
think
Reverend,
it I
Reaper.
think I think now we can talk to something I can actually we can have a
There we
conversation
go.
about because I've got to be frank, when it comes to AI, I can't really add anything. Um, I think it's very different. I was specifically trying to recreate a certain type of game, specifically Brutal Doom esque, sort of like very quick reflex-based FPS games, while something like Reverend or Satan seem to be a lot more slower. They seem to be a lot more I'm just slower, basically. And I don't know. I've not played through Satan. Do the enemies behave differently? Because I went to great lengths to try and make the enemies behave as different as possible.
So I got to point out, I started this conversation off saying I didn't even know Sam had started a game company. So yours is actually the first of
You did?
yeah.
I should have registered that.
It's
Good point.
yours is the first of the DOSman games that I have played. But given
Okay,
that they're all made using
well,
the same engine, I'm curious, like, what?
I would say my game is very
Okay.
different.
Thank you for listening to In the Keep. Please consider taking a moment to leave a review, comment, a like, and subscribe on your listening platform of choice. It really helps, and it's greatly appreciated. If you really love the show and want to see it grow, consider supporting us via Patreon. Supporters get episodes early, exclusive content and updates, chances to ask questions to guests, access to In the Keep's video games, and whatever else I can do for you. Every little bit helps. This podcast directly supports my ability to do what I love the most and to take care of my growing family. You can find links to everything that I'm talking about here over at inthekeep.com. Thank you, bless you, and enjoy the show.
I would say my game is very different. I have I'll try and get this over to the audience. Right? If it thinks of this. At no point, even though I have been tired, I've only been doing it in little bits every single day, I have put my heart and soul into this game, and I've gone into great efforts to make this as fun as possible. When you're playing another game, and if you find it repetitive, if you find you go into another room and there's another bunch of Nazis, and you go, "Oh, yawn, there's a bunch of Nazis," do know that I did try and design each area of each level to be as fun and variety as filled as possible. Like a lot of thought went into my level layout, my enemy behaviors. I tried very hard to make the enemies behave with as much variety as possible, to make them behave. Okay, so basically, I played Doom. I played a lot of Doom, and I was like, okay, in Doom, there's a variety of enemies, and you look at them and you immediately think, I know what this guy's going to do. And then you look at everyone else in the room within seconds, and you go, I know how these guys are going to react in conjunction with everyone else. So you see, if you go into a room in Doom, you see a pair of pinkies and you see a reverend, you go, okay, I circle strafe, I avoid the missile, and if I only have my fists, I sort of dart in and out on the pinkies. And your brain makes these thoughts within seconds, and that's the gameplay of Doom. And I wanted to recreate that. So I have enemies that look very distinct from each other and try and behave very differently to each other. So you have the cultists, who are my imps. You have the dark youngs, which are the things with tentacles and cooves, and they're my pinkies. You have the dimensional shamblers. They're my reverends. They're like a mix between a reverend, not a reverend. Is it archvile? Archvile is the word I'm looking for. They're my archviles, and they're skeletons.
Yes, the skeletons with the rocket launchers on their shoulder.
Yes, reverends. Yes. Yeah. It's like a mix between an archvile and a reverend. The point I'm trying to make is I tried very hard to get distinction between my enemies, which leads to gameplay and variety.
I've actually very analogous in the design Bible of In the Keep's Stellar Valkyrie. We were basically looking at like, okay, we're definitely not gonna copy the Doom, Doom's enemies by any stretch of the imagination, but to sort of like fill in like it's a really good Doom is a very good archetype for you should have enemies that sort of fill certain spaces, even down to like having at least one aerial enemy, sort of like a cacodemon that controls that part of the screen. It's just interesting. I was just going to say, interestingly, how you deal with these enemies is sort of designed based around in the original Doom that you can't aim, along the y-axis. You're only side to side. So
again, go on, carry on. I'll actually let you finish the sentence. Sorry, I keep thinking of ways to cut in, and I shouldn't.
That was pretty much the end of the thought, right? Just saying that it's interesting that you have this tradition in FPS to sort of fill up different parts of the space or fill up the different parts of a level with enemies that behave or occupy a certain part of that screen, even though the original game doesn't allow you to aim vertically. That was pretty much the whole thought. So go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. There are very few games that I think have like perfect balancing. The only two that come to mind for like perfect weapon and enemy balance is the original Halo and Doom. Right? For like they have an enemy and a weapon for each specific area. And all the later Halos added too many weapons, too many enemies. It lost this perfect balance. But in the original Halo, you saw an enemy and you're like, okay, I need this specific weapon. Right? And it was the same in Doom, in my opinion. Like the perfect balance. And to a lesser extent, I thought they had very good weapon balance in actually kind of in Blood, but I don't want to. Monolith's Blood.
Oh,
I
of
assume you
course.
played that,
Yes.
right? Yeah, yeah, okay. I don't like the actual campaign that comes with Blood. I think the campaign is broken hard. But if you play Death Wish, the expansion pack
Yes,
mod,
and then there's also I think my friend Damien made this one called Marrow that's quite popular. I think Marrow 2 is coming out at some point. But yeah, like a lot of the extended stuff for Blood or even like fan made stuff is really, really good. I think that the gameplay is solid, but the original
I,
campaign
I
has some difficulty, yeah, scaling problems.
100%. I did not
Yeah.
like Blood first. I used to play that game, right? And then I tried Death Wish after I saw a video of it on YouTube, and I discovered that wow, the balancing really fucking works. It was just the bad level design. Um, there is like that situation where like, okay, there's a perfect weapon for each thing. You use the flare gun at a distance, you know. But anyway, my original point was so few FPS games have that balance. And for all of my games' flaws, if it has any, I have tried very hard to try and achieve that sort of a balance. My machine gun is great at medium range. My Colt Navy, the main pistol you use all the way through it, is your sniper rifle. You use that to hit things from a distance, and you can fan it to when you're close to an enemy to deal a lot of damage quickly. My heavy machine gun is fucking dreadful at great distance, but it eats enemy parts at close range. And my fire
The magic
switch,
ring.
but it's like
Yeah.
one of my later weapons is like a ring that fires.
I was lucky
Magic
enough to
ring.
get
Yes,
the
I
secret,
really
which
didn't
I'm
play
not gonna tell
games
people how to
around it.
get, but yeah.
Yeah. So if you get the magic ring, that is my plasma gun from Doom. It kills everything. The magic ring just tears through everything. I've tried. My game doesn't have perfect balancing. I think my shotgun is. I tried to copy the exact damage of the shotgun from Doom, but it doesn't feel right. I don't know what it is. My shotgun still feels a little weak. It's going to get additional balancing before the game comes out, but it still feels a little weak at the moment. But I've tried. I've spent
So with the
months
Doom
balancing this
shotgun,
thing.
this is one of those things that every FPS designer faces at some point. Like the shotgun is like the kind of the quintessential weapon in a retro FPS. So in Doom particularly, the single barrel shotgun is basically a fucking rifle. I mean, you can shoot an enemy straight across the map like it's a railgun, more or less, and you do the same amount of damage. And
It's
then
really
in
yeah,
Doom 2,
yeah.
they introduced the double barrel shotgun, which is, much better at close range, but does a huge amount of damage. And then also like the feel of it, you there's a difference between shooting a 410 and a double barrel 12 gauge. It feels different. So you kind of have that player feedback that's also very important. And I think it's an interesting limitation of the engine you're working in is, having the ability to make the sound feedback match the damage that you're doing on screen. That's going to be an interesting thing for you to overcome.
There are problems with the engine. The sad truth is, if I had been able to sit down and study, as opposed to wanting something which I could do without studying, I probably could have made a better game in another engine. And I polished and polished and polished and tried as much as I can to make this game as good as possible. But I probably could have made a better game in Doom. There's no denying it. The engine is flawed. One of the limitations was I could only make 8 weapons. And you'll be amazed how fucking quickly those weapon slots get filled up. Right away, one of them has to be your melee attack, because you're always going to run out of ammo. Right? The next one's going to be your pistol, which I always have because you want to have a weapon which you're always going to have some ammo for, so you never really reduce the dues to punch. Like you have the punch in case you need it, but you have the pistol there as your fallback. You got your shotgun because you have to have a shotgun. Then you have your machine gun. Then you got your heavy machine gun. Then you got your fire ring thing, right? And oh, that's only 6. What the fuck? There's 8 weapon slots. What the fuck are my other ones gone to? 1 second. I'm opening up the game to look at my weapons section. Give me a second. Where did my weapons go? punch, Colt. Oh, there we go. Colt, pistol, shotgun, machine gun. Ah, my shoulder bazooka. I have a bazooka. That's what it is, which
Yes.
I've hardly ever used. Um, my heavy machine gun and my ring. If they'd given me more weapon slots, I would have done a double barrel. If they'd given me more weapon slots, I would have had a sniper rifle. But
It's
we
something that
work for what
you
we got.
don't see in a lot of what we would traditionally call like a retro FPS or like 90s first person games versus what you do later see kind of in the PlayStation Xbox era of shooters is weapons that only apply to a certain area at a certain time. So like, being able to like in a section, oh well, there's this mounted machine gun that you use from like a helicopter or whatever, but it only, you can't kick it with you once you leave the helicopter, that sort of thing. Can really add a lot to the dynamic of gameplay. Even with a bazooka, like if it's not like one of the weapons that you add to your repertoire that you carry around, but for a section it's really useful and fun. That can also be a good storytelling trope.
Yeah, it's all it's all down to like personal preference. I always liked having like a selection of like 8 or 9 or 10 weapons, which you really get to know, which you really get to like. It's down to personal preference. I mean, might I ask you a quick question? What's your favorite FPS game?
Of all time ever?
Yeah,
That's a loaded
why is it
question. That's a very loaded
Doom?
and why is it Doom? Yeah. I guess it's a really open-ended question. So I guess if I had like to be stranded on a desert island with no other game to play ever, but I had an internet connection and Doom 2, the iWad, I mean,
Yeah,
that would be the obvious choice because then I can
it would be.
basically
Yeah.
never run out of content. But geez, like best like stock out of the box as it stands FPS game ever may not be Doom.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
genuine
really? What makes
because just there's so much that takes. It's like saying Doom is like saying that your favorite rock band of all time is the Beatles. It's like the stock answer. There's a lot of other
really?
bands that take what the Beatles did and then do it arguably better in a different way. There's a difference between Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix. Like Jimi Hendrix innovated the guitar. Stevie Ray Vaughan perfected what Jimi Hendrix did with the guitar. So I have to say
I
that
was
there's. Go ahead.
gonna
Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, doing game development, you get new appreciation. Like if you start doing game design yourself and you start trying to make your own game, you suddenly get much more appreciation for the people who came before you. Right?
Right.
You
Right.
don't realize how hard it is to make something that's actually fun until you have to do it. It's really difficult.
I mean, if I had to say my favorite FPS game of all time, does it have to be a single player game?
I just pulled this idea out of my ass. You can say whatever you like.
I mean, Quake 3, man. Come on. Like that was the first one that I really loved. And I would say that the weapon balancing for multiplayer is super fun. There are great things to say about the original Quake and Doom, but then when you get into the multiplayer side of things, like you were saying, perfectly balanced. And they are for single player, but for multiplayer, they're not. And there's all these tweaks
Oh
and
no, no,
things that
two
happen over time.
multiplayer always, unless it was co-op, always did kind of suck. I kind of thought.
Yeah, then then you have like Unreal Tournament. I mean, you have so many options there,
All
but
out, nice. Yeah.
I'm literally scrolling through like my Steam, just all the plethora of FPS games that I have, trying to think is there any game that's just like more perfect than Doom in a single player campaign? I would even say Doom 2 is better than Doom 1 for you know for a lot of reasons especially in terms of weapons and enemy balancing.
They
Level
sort of merge
design,
together.
yeah, yeah, I get that too.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't have the PC Doom. I didn't know what an Archvile was. I had the PlayStation version.
You one of those guys.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I like Doom 64.
Yeah, I had the N64 version as well. It
Yep.
was an amazing port, both of them. But yeah, it wasn't until years later when I discovered like Doom modding and that I was like, oh, this is how I'm going to spend like 90% of my life. And it's a real shame that it was never on Steam in the modded capacity that I played it, because I'd love to know exactly how many hours I put into it, because it must be just an insane number. It must just like be years of time I've spent playing Doom. Just a shockingly large amount.
Um, Golly, I mean, there's Dusk is a really great kind of like more recent example of like a similar type of game that I think takes a lot of influence from games like Doom and Quake, but then arguably does it in some ways better. And then there's like, golly, there's so much more than just the shooting and the level design. There's like movement, there's setting, there's music, there's everything that goes into making a video game. I think,
Yeah.
like the whole
I
thing.
mean, if we're talking about soundtrack, then it's got to be like Perfect Dark for me or GoldenEye. One of those two.
Yeah.
Oh, Christ Almighty!
I mean, you brought up the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 ports of Doom. I've had Aubrey Hodges, the composer of that, on the show quite a long time ago. But
shut the front door! My God,
he's an amazing guy. Like people know him from like Doom and Quake 64 and that kind of stuff. But he went on to do like NFL's Madden's theme song. Like he's a pretty accomplished kind of guy. And
you know what? You've had me on here to talk about the game. We
could talk about whatever the fuck we want, dude. It's okay. We're gonna sell your game, I promise.
I would listen to the soundtrack of Doom from the CD itself. If I'm remembering correctly, because I remember I would grab a lot of the games and then just put them in my portable CD player and then just listen to them. I'm pretty sure Doom was one of the ones that had Redbook audio, I think is the way they describe it, but you could listen to it like a CD.
Mm-hmm.
I may be wrong because I may have just been reminiscing of just listening to it on YouTube later. Doesn't matter. Right. Talking about the game. Okay, so if anyone's listening to this, they want to know why they should buy the game. Well, for one, it's very cheap. Number two, I put a lot of time and a lot of soul into this. Like the game's gonna on.
I was just gonna say it makes up for its limitations engine wise with your storytelling and world building, and that's something I really wanted to drive home here.
There's something I wanted to add. I'm thinking, okay, this is going to sound totally cringe. You know how like hacks always include themselves in their work? Like Chris Chan would include himself in the Sonotune comic. Okay, another example, like David Lynch would appear in all of his stuff.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. I know, terrible tragedy. Survived all of them immediately. I'm thinking at the beginning of my game, I should have me as like a dungeon master, like standing there saying, like, if you've got your character sheet ready, camera pans down, shows a character sheet, and then I tell the story, and then that leads to and then like every now and then you cut out into a hub area, which is done like a mansion or something. And if you've found so many secrets, you can like unlock doors and get something. I don't know what, maybe like audio commentary, maybe concept art. Haven't figured it out yet. I've got like 2 months to add this, but I'm thinking of, trying because I got to do something to stand out. I got to do something to look different. And I'm like, why don't we lean into the tabletop gaming aspect since this is based on a tabletop gaming campaign? So yeah,
I think that's a really interesting trope because I mean that's where the concepts of like a lot of the early id Software stuff came from, is them sitting around a table playing D&D.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and at the core, this is an argument I've gotten into so many, people who really love Doom Eternal, and I've had to like defend my position that I don't hate the game, but I don't like it the same way that I like the entire rest of the franchise, because you can tell that sort of RPG element is gone from the basically the underlying structure of how the game works. I won't get into that whole argument, but essentially, it makes no sense that I would shoot an enemy 400 times with a shotgun and it not die, but then as soon as I do what the game wants me to do, suddenly I'm making progress like that. And then as opposed to the original game where it's like you have a lot more leeway in the way that you play that. I was actually thinking about that while I was playing Quartermain earlier, that, you give the player the option to kind of like approach different things different ways in the level design and also the weapon choice. And there are better ways to kill an enemy than to shoot a shotgun across the room. But if it's the only ammo you have, you can still actually progress. Whereas in a lot of cases, like the more modern stuff won't allow you to do that. So it's a good, I don't know if it was a choice or just kind of like a happenstance, but it works.
It's basically going back to old game design or newer game design. Newer game design, they want that more progression. They want unlockables. Older game design, you have a series of tools and you can approach them a combat area in that way.
Right.
If you think about a Doom level as a puzzle. You have just enough ammunition, just enough health on the map. Each room has to be approached. Like I said earlier, you look in there, you scan, you look, okay, this has this enemies, this enemies, this enemies. What can I do? Right. And that's the fun of the game. And that's how you have to approach my game, because you know how these enemies respond and you have to react in a very specific way. Um, yeah.
What do you think of some of the other games in the choices that they make, like similar stuff? You and I were talking about sort of like the way that enemies give feedback for being shot at, right? And some of your enemies, such as I don't know what they're all called yet, but like the guys that are sort of flying vampiric looking monsters or gargoyle looking things, they give very good feedback. If I shoot them, I can see them flash. What are they called?
Night Gaunts. They're all
Night.
based on Call of Cthulhu enemies.
Right.
Yeah. If you're a big fan of like Lovecraft and Lovecraft's writing, you're probably gonna hate my game because I didn't I I looked through the Call of Cthulhu enemy part of the manual. Okay, so Call of Cthulhu, for those who do not know, is a tabletop role-playing horror game.
Right.
Where you're meant to encounter these monsters and you're probably meant to die. The rules are designed in such a way the players are very squishy. They can't take much damage. And the monsters are meant to be horrendous and atrocious and take tons of damage and not die. And I looked through the rule book. I took the basic concept of the enemy and I turned them into FPS bad guys, which means they do die quite easily. So we're not being entirely accurate to Lovecraft lore here. But yeah, the creatures with the horns that fly, they're called night gaunts. Yeah.
They
Yeah, feedback is so important.
the way that they give you their feedback from, like they're stalling or they're taking damage and that sort of thing. So Doom was always quite good at showing pain states, as opposed to like Half-Life, right? We think we had talked a bit about that. Whereas, the difficulty scaling in Half-Life basically just makes enemies stronger. It's just they just have more health and then they don't give you any real feedback to when you're hurting them. So it's the first time that you boot up Half-Life and just put it on hard, it could be very, very frustrating. You're just sitting there like pounding an enemy with ammo, and it's like, am I even doing anything? Is this doing anything at all? And it's most frustrating in games where this problem occurs and it's a boss, and you really genuinely don't know when it's going to die. Kingpin, Life of Crime probably has one of the worst all-time final boss fights for that reason. I don't know if you've ever played it.
I've never played Kingpin, but I'm going back to Half-Life. There is gameplay is, to my mind, the most important thing. Plot and story are great and they're hugely important, but there's a reason why I've gone back to Half-Life like 3 times in my life, and I played Doom like once a month, at least every year. I play it a lot. Okay, I'm getting tongue-tied. There's a reason why I play Doom a lot. I don't play Half-Life a lot because all that cinematography, all that story is great, but it doesn't match really good game design. And like we were talking about enemies showing damage and hurt, it's the little things, but it pays off. In my game, if I'm going to blow my own trumpet, I did work quite a bit on the noises enemy make when you kill them. If you kill these big robots, they say like shutting down in German, and you get a whoa, whoa, whoa noise, right? And that rewards the player. There's another robot that has 2 miniguns, and if you can kill him before he fires, the miniguns carry on twirling with a twirling noise, and he falls down dead, right? It's these little things that are feedback to the player. So yeah, that is hugely important.
Do you do you kind of said like how gameplay is primary and then storytelling is secondary, but you put quite a lot of effort into the storytelling of this game. I would say more than a lot of retro FPS games would or have.
Yes and no. Okay. I had to put the story in because it was a love letter to the time I spent with my friends, right? So I had to put that effort in. But at the same time, the premise for my game was basically written on a napkin. The way my game design worked was, I'm like, okay, I can't believe it's taken us this long in a podcast to get to this point. I'm tired and distracted and I'm running around all over the place on tangents. Back to talking about the game design. when I made the game, I basically said, what are the places you go to in an old FPS games? You got your tech base. So I drew a bunch of tech base sprites and I worked on that for like a couple of weeks. And I'm like, what's another place? A mansion. I draw a bunch of mansion wall tiles and I do that for a bit. And I'm like, what's another cool place to have a fight? A train. So I've done that for a bit. And then a graveyard. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck is the actual plot though? And I already came up with the name Quartermain versus the Cult of Cthulhu. And I'm thinking, okay, we need some sort of reason for him to go to all these different places. And I just sat down one day and I thought, okay, it goes, we can do the graveyard first, and then we can put the train, and the train goes to the town because the town is near the castle. And that's how I put it all together. And then post hoc, I came up with justifications and reason for all of that. So um it is important in the fact that it's my way of saying I love these guys and I made this game. It's my way of saying that I've had fun with these guys, and it's an homage to my friendship and the time I spent with them. But at the same time, the plot's a little thin on the ground sometimes. But I did put the effort in on the presentation. I put lots of NPCs, and every time you talk to an NPC, their artwork appears on screen, and that looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun, and like I personally really love narrative-driven games. There's especially in the FPS space, there's a lot of folks that are like, they cling to that old John Carmack quote about how the story in a game is as important as the story in a porno or
It's a
whatever.
great quote.
And it's a great quote, but it's not necessarily true. It's just a genre difference. Like, okay,
Something I would try to. Sorry, go on, Karen.
I was just gonna say I've played games that were like heavy on the story, not so heavy on the gameplay, and I still enjoy it because of the story. Like the gameplay is just a sort of a necessary element for the sake of telling the story, and that's okay too.
Oh, 1000%. 1000%. It really games are an art form and they have 1,000 different flavors. But for a boomer shooter, I thought have the plot but have it be optional. And I've been really careful about tangenting, compartmentalizing the plot. So what I do is, as you've probably seen when you played the game, the plot happens in like separate segments. So when you get on the train, you get that little tiny cutscene area where you can talk to people and learn the lore, but you could just go ahead and skip it. You walk forward, you shoot the Nazi, you go straight into the action again.
Yeah.
That way, you don't really get the plot during the level, because if you die like 50 times to the level, it's so stressful hearing the plot again. Like if you're on a section where like you're doing a fight and then you die and then you rehear the dialogue again, that would always piss me the fuck off.
Looking at
So
you,
it's very-
Baldur's Gate. Looking at you.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
always compartmentalize it. You would have to go through that section again.
Right.
Yeah, it's
It's a classic sort of take, and you and I were discussing like your treasures that you pick up. I'm assuming that's a Wolfenstein 3D homage in a lot of ways.
actually no, it
Okay.
was Tomb Raider. I was playing a lot of Tomb Raider when
Okay.
I was making this. Yeah, and that was what. Yeah, you get it in Wolfenstein, but in Tomb Raider you would get free specifically per level, and then you get rewarded for finding free, and I like that because
Yeah.
it's I was thinking the reward should be an audio commentary because that'd be kind of quick to make. So what I would do is say that if you revisit the level after you found the free, I can load in me as an NPC and you can talk to me, and I'll just talk about the level or talk about the tabletop gaming that led to the level or talk about the stories of my friends and other games that I liked. And
Like a director's commentary sort of feature, which is interesting in
exactly.
games.
Yeah,
It is very interesting when it happens in games, especially if you're not expecting it. Like, wait,
yeah.
what? Like, but it's cool. I like the
That's why you
treasures
got,
aspect.
like,
I like anything that sort of creates a scavenger hunt in a level because that adds a whole new dynamic of gameplay that you don't get otherwise. And it makes for a lot of added value to the customer, right? Like if they played through the game once and that's it, and it's like, all right, well, I beat that game and that's it. I got my $3 worth in this case. By the way, guys, all DOSman games are going for like $3. Like they're totally worth picking up for the folks listening to this.
yeah, not expensive.
Yeah.
I like, like I said, it's a passion project. For all its flaws, if it has any, I know I put my heart and soul into it.
But that's what's interesting though, is that for someone to when you're choosing on the marketing side of like what price point do I put on this game, and there's always this discussion amongst between a publisher and designer, how do we add value to this? How do we add replay value to this? And that can come in so many different forms, like from adding Steam achievement type stuff or like scavenger hunt type stuff. It could be multiplayer modes, co-op modes, level editors, etc. But that's always going to be a thing. And then, when you pay $3 for a game, in a lot of cases, you'll have the idea of like, oh, well, it's going to be shitty. It's going to be cheap, whatever the fuck. But then there's always that the difference between a $3 game that sells like 12 copies and gets a few good reviews and one that sells 3 million copies and makes you, a lot of money is, oh my God, I can't believe how much value I got for my $3. And that's what you want to show up in your reviews. And that's what
my
you want.
design thesis, what I've tried to do in all my games, and you play Pixel Crisis, you've seen it, is go fucking crazy. Like at the beginning of Pixel Crisis, it starts with the player falling from a parachute to a castle through a window, then you fight through the castle, then a helicopter comes through the other side and starts shooting through the window at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is all done in pixel art, and that's within like 30 seconds. Go hard and go fast. Like, you've not played that far yet, but in my game, I'm just going to give spoilers just because it's going to advertise to people. This will hopefully entice people. In my game, you have a train, you get attacked by a gyrocopter on the train, you destroy the gyrocopter, it collides in a cutscene with artwork with the train, causing it to crash. You then, later on in the game, you end up in an airship. The airship explodes. You fall onto a castle. You fight on the castle roof. Go hard, right? You've got their attention. Go crazy with it.
Maybe you should have been an action movie director instead of a game designer.
Yeah.
Maybe learn how to code at all. Just have to go to camera school or whatever. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's a good philosophy. It really does work, especially for the genre. It works.
Yeah, you got to go over the top. It's because you want people to remember you, hopefully. If I have any regrets about making this game, apart from using the engine as opposed to learning Jay-Z doing, it's doing the World War II pulpy genre. It's very done in FPS games, and thus I'm afraid that it may sort of like blend in with the crowd of other ones. My other concept was the Principality of Mars, a remake, which was the steampunk game I made back in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I'd made that, because that's a really cool concept. And if I do go on to make other games after this, I'm planning to work on rail shooters, because it's a market which has almost no games in it, and it's a genre that I love.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that off camera too. That's going to be a thing that I love the whole concept of doing that.
Yeah, but that's happening. But I kind of wish I'd made the Principality of Mars, because it's a fucking cool concept. I feel like it probably would have sold slightly better because it's a different type of game. The concept for the Principality of Mars was, it's not until years later I realized I may have just been copying Killzone without realizing it, was the idea that Mars was a colony, and on the colony, a dictator rose up and he declared himself king because he was crazy, because he was getting high on like some sort of mushroom drug in Mars. We came up with some sort of Martian fungus that he was getting high on. And then he was assassinated by his son, who then blamed the assassination on the British and then invaded Britain. And throughout my 3 terrible FPS games that I made in FPS Creator, you start in London, then you go to Mars, and then you finally confront the prince on his orbital space castle, right? And these games were terrible. They had terrible frame rate issues, terrible AI, but the concept was cool as fuck. And looking back to it, I kind of wish I'd made that. But anyway, I probably will do at some point. I probably might do the Unity thing. The Principality of Mars is a cool idea, and it's mine. No one better steal it.
You've done such a good job with building the atmosphere and environmental storytelling. Even something I kept commenting about, like the skybox in your game, and it's something that a lot of people don't put too much effort into. It's just like, oh yeah, it's just got to be a sky. But like how you come out in front of the train and you can see the castle in the background, and it's simple and it's elegant, but it's also like foreshadowing what you're ultimately
Yeah,
going
it
towards
is.
and stuff. Even if you don't pay attention to any of the dialogue, that is telling you like this is what you're doing. Yeah.
You'll see the airship arrive. You'll see the airship getting docking. You'll see the sun slowly start to eclipse. You know, as you go through there, it's a little detail, but I love doing stuff like that. I fucking love foreshadowing.
Yeah, it's good storytelling and it's good world building overall. I think that probably comes from a lot of your D&D oriented
But well,
gameplay, that kind of thing.
actually, that was from Rocky Knight Adventure.
Okay.
Do you ever play that game?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Rocket Knight Adventure is a game that Americans don't know anything about because it was released in America on the it was released on the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis, as you guys know it.
Mhm.
And when they released it in America, they made it too hard. It was a thing Konami in America was doing at the time, where they were trying to make sure the games weren't too easy because they thought the Americans liked hard games and because of rental markets. They thought if it was too easy, they wouldn't rent it again and again and again. Because they made it too damned hard in the American version, it never really took off. Rocket Knight Adventure was Konami's attempt to do a platforming game, platform mascot game, and the main character is a possum who is a knight with a jetpack. It's one of my favorite games of all time. At the very beginning of the game, the first thing you see is a castle with an airship docking. You then go to the castle, get on the airship, and then fight the bad guys on the airship. I basically kind of copied this idea for my FPS game. But yeah, it's a small tangent. Rocket Knight Adventure on the Sega Mega Drive. Play the PAL version. It's fucking amazing. Anyway, sorry.
You're very theatrical. It's in your name too. I mean, like you were born to be a storyteller in a way. This work.
Well, a lot of this is insomnia. A lot of this is only sleeping 4 hours. I get this manic energy. I can feel it in my voice.
Yep.
I'm afraid I'm going to say something stupid because of it, but I'm fighting it. I haven't said anything stupid yet. I don't think.
No, you're doing pretty good so far, and I can relate to that. We were talking a little bit before we got onto the recording, but like shift work permanently changes you as a person. Like if you work overnight shifts for a significant amount of time, it permanently changes your brain. This is like scientific fact too. It's odd.
Now for a second part of my lore dump, so basically I was a perfectly healthy person, and then my coworker said, "There's this job going. It's the cushiest job imaginable." And we were both working in the supermarket, and he said, "You work this job. My friend done it for a bit, and you don't have to fucking do anything. You come early in the morning, and this is like 3 in the morning, right? So it's very early in the morning,
Yeah.
and then you just basically move this stuff about, and then you sort out the newspapers coming in, and no one bothers you. It's like 2 hours working, like an 8-hour shift. It's fine." And I went, "Oh wow, I can do that. How hard could that be?" And at first I was fine, but then I stopped sleeping. Like at all. I just completely stopped sleeping for something like a week. I was going fucking insane. But I kept to it a bit, and I finally started to get my sleep back a little bit. But even when I was sleeping, I was tired all the fucking time. And I have had blood tests. I've had cameras where the sun don't shine. I thought I convinced myself I had cancer for a bit. I I I have done everything. I finally quit that job, got a new daytime job, but still, it's been almost a decade, and I only sleep 4 hours most nights, and I am tired all the fucking time. And I don't know if it's related to the not sleeping properly. And I know you're thinking, if you're only sleeping 4 hours a night, that's got to be the reason why you're tired. I don't fucking know because I'm really fucking tired.
But it's
Anyway.
hard when you're tired and you can't sleep more than 4 hours. Like,
Yeah, precisely. Because people say, "What does that mean?" Tired and sleepy are different fucking things, motherfucker. I know it sounds crazy,
Yep.
but they are different things.
It's so true.
Tired is the inability. Yeah, tired is the inability to focus, the inability to think straight. Sleepy is the urge to fall asleep. And with me, falling asleep isn't the problem. It's waking up after 4 hours and not being able to get back. Like I can fall asleep every night. It's just after 4 hours, I will wake up.
You start to go crazy
that's
too. You
ruined-
start to hear shit and see shit
Yeah.
and like fucking think you're dreaming and then you realize you were awake the whole time. It's very much like the movie Fight Club. That opening dialogue where he's explaining what it's like to have insomnia is from I'm sure Chuck Palahniuk has very real personal experience having written that. Like everything is just a copy of a copy of a copy and yeah.
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 Is it like you're like a flying horse? Whenever I talk to you, you feel like you're about to dart. I'm like, yeah, I know. We just
Yep. It's so true. I definitely had like I said, my own struggles with that because I there was several years in a row where I did not see sunlight for more than 2/3 of the year at all, and like it when you work from like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and then you go home and like you're driving through the sun, the sun is coming up and you're ending your day. And you're walking into a gas station and buying like a fucking 30 rack of beer or whatever, and you're like, and everyone else is getting coffee. You're on a different wavelength. You are functioning on a different frequency than the rest of the world. And it is weird. You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. If you love this show and you love supporting indie video games, please take a moment to check out In the Keep's upcoming Stellar Valkyrie. Built in the GZ Doom engine, this retro first-person shooter puts you in the universe of space bird bounty hunter Falco, who is on a mission to save his ex-girlfriend from the evil Black Star cult. Just type birdgame.space, that's BIRD game.space into your browser. Hit enter, smash the wishlist button, and stay tuned. And I'm sure everyone listening to this who, has had a job like that, can totally relate. It's
I've known every subtle variation of being tired. I've known irritability. I've known zoning out. I've known like you said, hallucinations. I've it's social anxiety, not being able to look someone in the eye for someone you've known your entire fucking life, and you're still like darting your eyes around because you can't stand to look at them because you've suddenly become incredibly anxious for no reason. Don't do night shift is the general gist. Ever. Even if it seems really easy and cheap, there's a reason they're giving you a job that doesn't require any work because no one else wants it.
Unless you're willing to sacrifice some of your sanity for creativity. I don't recommend it. It's not worth it. But if you have to.
No. If all of this is just to do with a broken circadian rhythm, which it quite possibly is, if you count up the hours I've lost, it's decades. Like it's hundreds of hours I've spent just scrolling on my phone or just staring at the fucking ceiling. Just countless hours lost.
No, you'd be better off picking up like a drug habit than you would not sleeping. Like the health effects that it has on you long, like you'd be better off smoking cigarettes than you would be not sleeping. It's bad. Very, very, very detrimental to your long-term health. And like you said, your lifestyle, just not being able to work on the things that you do want desperately to be able to work on, like because you're mentally exhausted all the time. Forget about physical exhaustion. Now I get it, man. But despite that, you're overcoming the odds. You're still making games. So at least there's that.
Oh yeah. No, this is never stopping. Once I finish this, I'm gonna focus on my other new hobby. I'm gonna oil paint for I've taken up oil painting. It's the best fucking hobby in the world. I love it. I'm gonna do that for about a month and I'm gonna go, okay, straight back to it. Let's focus. Let's pick a subject for a light gun game and let's fucking make it however we do it. You were saying like you hire a coder. That's a great idea. It's a good idea. But okay, I'm talking tangent time. I was talking earlier about the importance of game engines which don't require coding. Another one that any listeners are listening to that I highly recommend, it's a fantastic tool, is Shmup Creator, which lets you create shmups, which are games in the audience. If you don't know this, games where you're the little ship and there's enemies and they fire 1 billion bullets. It's a fantastic tool on Steam. It's only like £50, I think, or $70 or something like that. And the tool lets you push objects on screen and then give them pathways, and then you can create a shmup. I politely asked the dev, I said, hi, I'm too tired to make light gun games. I would like to make a light gun game with your engine. Would you add that for me? He said yes. And after like a year of stalling, he's finally done it. In the latest update, if you go into the actual code of the engine itself, there's you open up the level in a text document, go through these different options, and you turn on use mouse control. You can make a light gun game using Shmup Creator, which is really cool. And if you don't do any coding, I could theoretically make a whole light gun game in maybe 5 months. Just drawing all the sprites, putting it in there, and telling them what to do. Now there are downsides. He hasn't included any ammo. He says he will do. There's no ammo variant. Not variant, variable. There's no ammo variable. So any game you would do would have unlimited ammo. So I'm thinking maybe like a machine gun light gun game, like Operation Wolf. Have you ever played
No.
Operation Wolf? Operation Wolf was an arcade game from 1985, I think. It was one of the first light gun games ever existed. It worked because they didn't actually have light gun technology. The way it worked was when you move the machine gun around, it was basically a joystick. So when you're moving the gun around, it was moving like a joystick, which would then tell the computer where you're.
For some context, I
Right.
was born in
I'm thinking,
1995. So, I mean, there's gonna be some shit that I
yes,
missed.
I think I'd actually be 40 now. I've lost track of time. I think I'm actually 40. Yeah. Shit. Fuck. Yeah.
If it's not in the history books, it's
I am
likely I
old.
didn't. You know, if it's before I was born and not in the history books, it's likely I haven't seen it. But still,
Yeah, it's an old arcade game. There are some. Have you ever played
LA Machine Gunners sounds really familiar. Is that
Yeah, it was a Sega arcade game from 1997, maybe. I think it had a Wii port. I might make something like that, basically. A game where you have unlimited ammo machine gun and then you just at everything. Yeah.
I'm looking up like images of this to see if I can jog my memory. The gun handle on this arcade machine looks extremely familiar, so I'm wondering if I have messed with it in an arcade.
Yeah.
My all-time favorite
A lot of
light
those
gun game is Terminator Salvation by far. Like I've put more quarters into that machine than I probably had quarters otherwise in my life. So
Again, it's because I'm old. I'm always going to say my favorite stuff is the older stuff. It's my favorite light gun game of all time is probably
Time Crisis is that's like saying you like the Beatles, though. You know what I mean? This
I only like the first 3. I feel like there was a real sense of camp to Time Crisis. There's a real sense of like over the top silliness that kind of got lost from 4 onwards. Those first 3 really toned that down. Some Japanese silliness that I liked. Because it felt like a dance, right? You were shooting the bad guys and they would fly all over the place. And they all wore brightly colored uniforms to indicate how well they could shoot. I love that game so much.
What do you think of the idea that sort of genre and storytelling comes in like basically 30-year intervals? So to kind of illustrate what I mean is if you watch films from the 80s and you have these sort of tropes that are like, you know, the kind of absentee parents, latchkey kids that are sort of live in these big suburban homes and stuff where they're, you know, they're kind of free to roam and do whatever they want. It's like not actually an accurate picture of what it was like in America in the 80s. It's actually 30-year-olds who grew up in the 50s and 60s finally able to make stories about what it was like when they were growing up. And then that sort of happens iteratively over time. So in the 2010s, you have this resurgence of things that were popular in the 80s. So you have games that are influenced by people who would have been watching movies in the 80s. Yeah. Yeah.
1,000%. 1,000%. Yeah, no, totally.
Here we are in the 2020s, and we're talking about 90s first-person shooters, right? Like,
what a classic example of this is when I was a kid, video games were never writing media. What I mean by that is you would watch something and they would have a video game and it would be wrong. Like it wouldn't look like any real video game. It would be like what they usually do is they get a CGI company to come up with a very silly CGI thing, and then characters would be holding the wrong type of joystick and then in modern media, you would watch a cartoon and it would do a parody of a video game and it would be pitch perfect. It would be a perfect 100% parody of it. Is it Smiling Friends? Happy Friends? What's that new cartoon?
Happy Tree Friend?
No. There's one called Smiling Friends, I think it's called. And the whole premise of the show is they're like counselors. And they had to cancel a character who was a PS1 character. The character was basically Crash Bandicoot. And when they had this character on screen, he would be a low polygon model. And whenever he would talk, his voice would be incredibly distorted because it was like tiny audio files on a PlayStation disc. It was a perfect parody, you see. My point is, yes, you're entirely correct. people who make the media will be able to perfectly reference media from, was it 20,
whenever
30
they
years
were
ago?
a kid, you know, whatever the interval that is. But yeah. So like, you know, the people making Stranger Things, right, in the 2010s are remembering their childhood in the 80s. So it's like this modern 80s nostalgia. But if you go back and watch shit from the 80s, they're referencing shit from 20 to 30 years before that because that's when they were kids. You know, so they were watching, I don't know, Easy Rider or Stanley Kubrick films, or you know, stuff that would have been popular when they were young, and then they're replicating that when they're finally old enough and have the money and the space and time to do that. And I think that's a very important thing in media to remember, especially when you're looking
I
back
don't know,
historically.
I don't know if this is true, but I remember hearing something on a podcast the other day where someone was saying that in recent years, he feels like the latest few decades, there hasn't been the massive changes in culture there was for like the previous decades in media. Like if you look at like 80s media to 90s media,
Mhm.
completely different. You look from 90s to 2000s, completely different. But for the last few, from like 2010s to 2020s, so much. Do you think there's any merit to
I
that?
think
Or
it's
is
there's this great book that I recommend folks get a hold of called Within Context of No Context. And it's sort of an exploration of kind of growing up in the 20th century, and especially the later 20th century, in the post-atomic age and that sort of thing. And even I would say that the big watermark, you know, that divides today from the past. I won't even say today. I'll go like the later 20th century from all time before it would have been World War One. That permanently changed the world. And then the next big thing after that appears to be sort of the widespread use of the internet. And so I
yeah,
agree with what you're saying, in the way that it's reflected in media, but I would also say that it's like there's nothing to compare now to. So like if you talk to a 23-year-old, like my wife is 23, and the world that she grew up in is co- not I'm not even like she hates when I even use the word generation difference because it's only 6 years difference, but it's like I remember what it was like when, you know, people just didn't have the internet. When people had to like if you got in an argument with your buddy, you 2 just fucking argued about it. And then if you were born in
I am so
2001, you've never seen
I
a
am so
world where you don't just solve that problem by Googling it immediately. And then I think that in media,
I
that's
am
also reflected. But the people that are currently making popular media are mostly going to be 30 to 40 years old. I mean, people who have experience, worked their way up to the point where they have enough money to make something. So they're either trying to appeal to that younger audience or they're appealing to their own audience, which is going to be people to your age, you know, that 25 to 30 kind of demographic. Sorry, 39. Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm so very glad I didn't have the
Hmm.
internet as a child. I was raised. I didn't have the internet till I was 20, like maybe 22, 23, and I'm grateful for it because if I didn't, I would probably be known as a lolcow. I'd probably have I'd probably have like a Wikipedia page on me somewhere about the incredibly cringy early YouTube career of Prince of Mars. Yeah, I dread to think.
Think there's advantages to
But
both, but I'm certainly happy that I know both sides of that coin. And I grew up in Alabama too, so I always like if someone's like, "Well, what generation are you?" And I mean, like technically I'm a millennial, but I'm like, but I grew up in I won't say underdeveloped because that sounds like I'm shitting on it, but you know, we got things a lot later than the rest of the first world in a lot of cases. So there's just shit that you know, maybe someone else that was born the same year as me that grew up with high speed internet, you know, all around and them would have had that I just didn't. I mean, I was more or less in the woods or on the farm, you know, kicking a soccer ball around or some shit like that with my brothers than I was consuming media on the internet or like I didn't even see YouTube until like 2005. And I thought because I'd never seen high speed internet until I was visiting a friend's house who had high speed internet and YouTube, and I thought it was just a website where you watched Dragon Ball Z. I was like, "Oh, there's a thing where you can watch Dragon Ball Z on the internet." It was so confusing to me. But and then you know, just for a little lore dump on my side, I didn't really until I was 20 years old and in the military, I didn't really like have a computer that I regularly used. You know, I didn't play computer games. I played console stuff, but I didn't have like a PC, you know, and like access. I didn't have a Steam account or any of that stuff until I was an adult. And I think that developmentally affects the way that you think about a lot of this stuff if you grow up with it.
Yeah, yeah. I had a point, but in the middle of that conversation that you were having, it seems to
It's okay.
escape my mind. I think we're originally talking about selling to an audience because of nostalgia and the circle of nostalgia, but that's not the reason why I want to do it. I want to make fucking light gun games because they were my favorite
Right.
genre as a child. Because I had a G-Con 45 and a PS2 and a CRT TV, which I still own, which I think still works. I haven't turned it on for a year. I've been using my. Do you know what a Sinden
No.
light gun is? A Sinden light gun is a light gun that you can get from modern PCs where you plug it in a USB socket. And the way it works is it looks at the TV with a camera on the inside of the gun, and it then does, within milliseconds, calculations of where the cursor should be to then let you shoot the TV screen like a normal light gun. It's not perfect. It's not great.
You
It's good enough.
you fuck around with VR headsets at all?
No, I've not. Basically, because I didn't have enough room in my house. I heard you need a lot of room for that, and British houses
So
are fucking
so here's
tiny.
an interesting thing about them. I have a Quest 2, and I've got pretty limited experience with this stuff, but it's so let's say you wanted to do an FPS in VR,
Hmm.
and you don't have a lot of room, right? And most people don't. Like that, they take this into account when they're designing these things in the games around them. It's like, you know, you're not really gonna like run around your house like Doom guy and you know, E1. You're not gonna have that layout of E1M1 in your home. That's ridiculous. But the way that they do a lot of the FPS games is that they sort of make it like a three-dimensional light gun game where you're basically standing stationary in an area, you blast everything in that area, and then the game moves you to another area, and then you do it again, and so forth. So it's like almost a new iteration on that old trope. So instead of a 2D gallery where you're shooting into basically a theater window, you're doing that in three-dimensional space, but you're not moving in three-dimensional space. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I would have to play that to know if I'd like it, because I feel that when you play a light gun game, your vision is held within that one area, that one
Mhm.
square of the screen. So you know the enemies are going to turn up there, and you have a split second to figure out where they are. If we're in a full three-dimensional area, it would be harder to get the player's attention in time to get that knee-jerk reaction gameplay
So
that I would feel.
the way that you get around that is level design, though. You don't necessarily have to turn the player around all the way in. You're not standing in the center of a room. Imagine you're standing in like a canyon with walls on either side, and the enemies are in front of you. You know, so you're not really looking all the way around you. You might be mostly looking within, you know, a 90 to 120 degree FOV in terms of like where the action is taking place.
I would be lying if I said I wasn't tempted, but I would have to experience it first. I've never had one on my head, so I would be tempted. I am tempted. I mean, I've not even looked into it. I don't know how expensive VR headsets are
Couple
now.
hundred probably pounds. I'm not sure how it translates to dollars, but I would imagine for something decent, you know, a couple £100.
Yeah, yeah, it's certainly something worth considering. But yeah, no, I was thinking like Quartermain Arcade. Have you ever played an arcade game called Crypt Killers?
I have. Yes. Yes.
Yes. It wasn't amazing, but the general concept, it was mid at best. But the general concept of like shooting
Mhm.
mummies and skeletons, that, but Quartermain, the arcade game, come on,
I'm pretty
it's a
sure I
cool
played that in a
idea,
movie
right?
theater. Like it was like one of the, you know, lobby in the movie theater games that we had. And that's also how I played House of the Dead. Same way.
Did you play
Yeah, of course.
Tiny?
Yeah. In fact, that was right next to
Oh my God, Tiny
House
was
of the
so
Dead
good.
in the movie theater I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
it was so
Yeah.
good. Holy fuck. That was the main inspiration for House of the Bread, which is my other light gun game. Yeah, that was, oh God, I fucking love Carnival so much. Holy shit. I remember finding a YouTube video years later, where the devs were talking about making it. And it was just fascinating listening to them, seeing them show up all their notes and all their ideas.
Back
Yeah,
to
that was great.
back to Quartermain, or at least tangentially, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Lovecraft. I mean, you said that you were primarily inspired by the tabletop game, but
Yeah.
are you a fan? You made that other game about Lovecraft too. The other
Well, yeah, okay. I'm gonna get. You're gonna get a lot of people gonna not want to play the game after I finish this next sentence. But really, no. I'm so sorry. Look, I'm sorry, guys. I tried. I really did. I put on the audiobooks, but I've literally listen. I've listened to the collected works of Shakespeare, and I found Shakespeare easy to understand than
it is a
Lovecraft.
particular type
Um,
of English that I would imagine. Yeah, yeah. That
really.
turn of the century,
Um,
early 20th century Rhode Island transatlantic English
Look,
is different.
I'll be frank with you. I
Yeah.
like Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, yeah. I like Call of Cthulhu, not necessarily Lovecraft. I've had hundreds of hours playing the tabletop RPG Call of Cthulhu, not so much listening to the works of Lovecraft. I made it through the actual story, the Call of Cthulhu, and the Mountains of Madness, and the ones everyone listens to, like the big hitters, Shadow of Rinsmouth, right? But I've not listened to much more after that because, like listening to Edgar Allan Poe, same problem. It's just really hard to understand, and not just understand. It's not so much understand. It's just a really dry and kind of dull. And people are gonna hate me, and they're not gonna want to buy the games out. I should have just lied. I should just lie to you and said I loved it.
The actual
But
truth
it's
is
the
that there's
truth.
probably more people who feel the way you do than don't, and that's a and so
Yeah,
one of the ways to kind of like put that into context is like I bet a lot of the people that are really into I love Lovecraft stuff. I'm really into like all these different games and tabletop stuff and whatever are actually more into the derivative works of people who are inspired by Lovecraft than Lovecraft himself. So like in the same way that there's a shitload of people who love uh fantasy like medieval fantasy stuff. Like have you actually read The Lord of the Rings? Or did you watch the movies and play all the games and, like extended universe stuff? And that's a big difference. So, I mean, I find it hard to read Tolkien. I have, but
I
it's
mean,
not exactly modern English. It's like reading the King
with
James Bible or something. It's
with book
yeah.
with books and with painting and
Mm.
artwork as well, there is so much snobbery. When I first tried to get into painting, I had the mistake of going onto oil painting Reddit, and like you say, what tools do you need? And they're like, oh, you can't get these paints. You absolutely must get these ones because they're the expensive artist ones. You need these brushes, and to be frank, I got on just fine with the cheaper shit. And there's a lot of snobbery in books as well. Because like if you say like, oh, listen to like Black Library novels, people are like, oh, you're obviously listening to crap. But Space Marines go shoot, shoot, and boom, boom. I had fun. I was enjoying myself. That's the importance, right? That's the important thing. As well, I was enjoying myself. It's I listen to a Stephen King. If I want to listen to horror, I'll probably just listen to King. Because
Did you
fucking hell,
enjoy
that man can
Alan
write.
Wake by chance? That
Uh,
series?
I
Yeah.
did. I loved Alan Wake. I thought it was a great game. I only played it once though. It's one of those things where
It's
it was
interesting
story,
how
not so much.
many games there are,
Go on.
oriented around Tolkien and Lovecraft and that sort of thing. And I feel like Stephen King is such a prolific. He's translated into film so well. But there's not a lot other than Alan Wake. Like, there's not a lot of video games that are like Stephen King, the video game.
It is
Yeah,
odd. It is really odd. Now the thing is, I would do that, apart from the fact that, like I said at the very beginning, I don't trust my ability to write. I genuinely don't. I feel that I would just be insulting Stephen King if I attempt to make a Stephen King inspired game. Um, but yeah, it is weird there isn't more
well,
Stephen
why is it there like
King-esque
why
video
is it
game
there like the
media.
Green Mile, the game, or that kind of thing, or the stand like these things just don't. They're not there. Is it? Does he?
Meanwhile, doesn't have
Yeah.
really many
Is it
action
is like
sequences.
Stephen King himself like turning down video? Does he have a problem with the art form that he's not licensing things? Like, forget about derivative works. Why aren't they
He,
licensed? Why does it that exist? And yeah,
here's what I say about Stephen King, right? I know what that man has and hasn't done because he hasn't or has or hasn't included it in his books. Anything that man has ever done in his life, he's included it in one of his novels. And in none of his novels, none of his characters
that's
have ever
true.
played a
They've all
video
done
game,
a
to
lot of
my
coke
knowledge.
and drank a lot
Like
of
he
alcohol.
has never played a
Yeah.
Yeah, they've all got a lot of coke, right?
Yeah.
And they've been hit by a lot of
Had
cars,
a lot of
but they've never
existential
actually played a
crises,
video game.
spiritual visions.
Um,
No video games though. You're right. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You like Stephen King. Every main character he's ever written is a self-insert. Every single fucking one of them. Um, and like I feel like I know the man, even though I've never actually met him because I've listened to a lot of his stuff. And yeah, no, I know he's never played D&D and he's
Here's
never
a
fucking played a video game, and that's sad because I feel that he would be great at D&D, and I feel that if he got into video games, he
let's
could
go
have
into this
written a
together.
really
I will
fucking
try
good
to
one.
get in contact with Stephen King's
Uh,
people, and it's going to be hard, but and then you can come up with the gameplay design. But I think that like Misery would be a great like Telltale style like point and click adventure game. Like if you could just adapt something like Misery into a game, it
Oh,
would
100%.
work really well.
Yeah, like you shouldn't. No. What you do is you don't adapt. You don't adapt because the books are
Uh-huh.
already their own thing and they were written as a book. You need to get Stephen King to
Yeah.
play a bunch of games. I know it sounds crazy, and then have him
Yeah.
create something that matches the medium. Because if you try and adapt, it'd be like doing like Gone with the Wind, the FPS game.
Just
It wouldn't,
guilt him into it. Be like, well, Harlan Ellison did it, and he'll be, oh, well, Harlan, fuck that guy. I don't know. I'm better than him. I don't know. That's a good point, though, man. I just genuinely like. I don't know why that doesn't exist more. The Alan Wake is the single one and only. If someone else knows of any, please like comment or whatever in the notes here because I don't.
No, there isn't. I swear to God, there is nothing else that's inspired by Stephen King. And I feel that everyone's kind of copying everyone else. It's one of the reasons why I kind of regret doing a Lovecraft game. Because when I first made my first Lovecraft game, which is the Tales of the Cthulhu, which I made in FPS Creator back in 2002 or something, there were no Lovecraft games. There was Call of Cthulhu, The Dark Corners of the Earth on the original Xbox. I fucking hate that game. And so people are going to hate me for saying that, but that game was broken hard. And there was my games, and that was pretty much it. And then over the years, I saw Call of Cthulhu really take off, and there was so many Lovecraft games, so many out there, and yeah, people just copy each other. Like it became a trend to do Call of Cthulhu inspired Lovecraftian games.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. Whatever happened to the good old days, when computer role-playing games spent more time telling great stories than stressing you out with season passes and needless grinding? Call of Ragnar is our effort to bring back the best in RPGs. Play in the immersive world as two friends adventure into a murder mystery that lands them in the middle of a battle between gods. Head over to callofsaragnar.com. That's call of SAREGNAR.com for more info, and be sure to wishlist on Steam.
I was just thinking, it's a really inspiring game. I was just listening to earlier this morning Metal Gear Solid. I was doing a no commentary playthrough in the background while I was working on the game, and I really admire the original Metal Gear Solid because Hideo Kojima just included everything he liked in one game. He wanted to talk about nuclear weapons, so he just started talking about that. He liked Snake Plissken from Escape from New York, so he made that his main character. He thought mechs were cool, so he included a mech. I admire that. I wish I could think of an idea where I could just take everything I like and shove it into one giant vat and then put on blend.
Metal Gear Solid is so interesting because like it has that Escape from New York inspired part of it, and I'm a huge fan of Escape from New York and Escape from LA and basically everything John Carpenter ever made. But you're absolutely right. It's just like Hideo Kojima just shoving everything, all of his interest into one thing is for better or worse in many cases. And the whole series, has that sort of thing. But I do like the boldness to just basically like scrape Snake Plissken right out of Escape from New York and put him into his own world.
Yeah, it really did.
I was
the whole fucking thing.
working on a game called Combustion when I was at 3D Realms, and it should come out, I think, sometime in the next year or so. But it has this main character that's actually a cat. His name's Calico, but has some sort of some subtle Snake Plissken influence as well into that character. But there's derivative, and then there's just like down to the name, stealing a character and putting an eye patch on them and everything. That's a whole new level of derivative art in a way.
It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, he did try and go to John Carpenter and say, "Do you want to sue him?" Then you can find this tweet. He posted on Twitter, and John Carpenter's like, "No, I didn't want to sue Hideo Kojima. I met him at a convention. He seems like a nice guy."
Yeah, he made me shitloads of money from all these nerds going back and watching my movies. Like, probably. Yeah.
But no, what I would like to at some point in the future, like, yeah, I'm making light gun games, but I would like to just make a list of everything I enjoy, put it down on a piece of paper and say, how can I combine all of these things? How can I take all this stuff that I like, and just sort of blend it together and make something new?
I got a feeling that in like 5 years,
Because
whenever you make this thing, we're gonna look back at this podcast and be like, that's where it happened. That's when they had their $1 million idea right there.
I realized a long time ago that there's nothing is truly original. Like, I would always look at games made in itch.io, and then you see what's popular, and I'd always go, "Oh, why didn't I think of that? It's a brilliant idea." A game where you're a robot paparazzi and you're chasing someone, or a game where you're like trying to date frogs, or whatever ridiculous fucking idea they have, and I'm like, "That's creative. Why didn't I think of that?" And I realized that creativity for creativity's sake isn't necessarily amazing. You just have to take what you like, recreate it, and do it well. And as long as you have passion there, as long as you believe in what you're doing, other people will enjoy it too.
Okay.
Right. What else about Quartermain would you like to discuss?
I guess my next we've already kind of gone on the Lovecraft tangent, which wasn't what I thought it would be, but that's okay. No, I'm not saying you disappointed me. It is interesting though that you have made now 2 Lovecraft games and don't love Lovecraft. That is so wild.
Well, it's again, I was trying to think of something no one else was doing, and I'm like, and the first time I done it, it was like, oh, all this iconography is really fucking cool. All these tentacles and stuff, ancient demons. I'll do that. And with the second one, I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for the fact that I was basing it on my friend's characters. You know, Otherwise I just never would have done it.
Yeah, I find it so strange that it's not really strange. It's something that you see a lot where things are derivative, and we got onto that a little bit earlier. But just to like the vision that people have when they think of an angel, right? And they think of like this cherubic, even the word cherub. They think of like a youthful thing with like a diaper and wings and like a halo and all that stuff. Is in no way whatsoever what it says in the source material. It's actually inspired. Their vision is something that happens, over 1,000 years later in the Renaissance and Enlightenment period. But if you're talking about like a biblically accurate angel, it's something much more, terrific and like strange in imagination. It's got like 4 faces and wheels, and there are all these different descriptions you get. And then, but then there's all this stuff that is based on something that was inspired by that, but changed something fundamental about it. And then that happens so much, just with everything, all derivative works, all video games, all that stuff.
Yeah, totally. It sounds just like, oh, you're a Lovecraft fan. No, I'm a Call of Cthulhu fan. I'm, it's it's so easy for you to fall in love with different things, different aspects, different variations. Like, how many fans are there of the original Ian Fleming Bond novels as opposed to fans of the movies?
And that are Mission Impossible fans or Austin Powers fans that don't know anything about 007.
Or Jurassic Park, it's
So do you feel that there are other similar topics that you would make a game about? Like you've explored like the action movie stuff, and you've even done a Christmas game. You've done Lovecraft now.
There are subject matter that I've never figured out a way to make a really good game out of, and I don't think anyone ever has. Is I kind of like mecha anime, but specifically when I say that, I mean like Gundam, which is a specific series. But I like the aesthetics of it. I like anime characters yelling as mechs fight in space. And I've never found any of the video games made about Gundam to be good. So I've always like thought, how could I take this idea of like screaming anime protagonists and make it into a preferably like an arcade game, because I like arcade games, and make it kind of good-ish. I was thinking maybe something along the lines of Star Fox, but then you end up with like basically what is just like Space Harrier. But I don't know. I would love. I can't picture it in my head just yet. But I would like to make something sort of like mecha anime. Um, as for other concepts for games, I don't know. I like Star Fox. Maybe I can combine that and have like Mecha Gundam Star Fox with little furry animals inside mech suits. I don't know. Um, I definitely know I'm going to make a lot of light gun games. As for ideas, I've got like 5 or 6 different ideas. I'd like to make a RoboCop-like game. I would like to make. Have you ever played a game called Wild Guns on the SNES?
No.
Okay. It's available on Steam, but I wouldn't recommend buying it on Steam. It's almost identical to the SNES version. It's really good. Wild Guns is a science fiction western. So you're in the future and it's anime-esque. So the bad guys are riding on robotic horses, and there's like cyborgs, and there's like drones, but you're a cowboy and you're firing a cowboy gun. So I think a sci-fi western light gun game would be pretty fucking cool. You can call it Intergalactic Outlaw, and you go from planet to planet, and then in one town you've got to shoot all these aliens that are also cowboys. It's silly and campy and over the top. The important thing with doing light gun games, you've got to be campy, you've got to be ridiculous, you've got to be over the top. Another cool idea. What about Castlevania, the light gun game? Right? Maybe Evil Dead. You travel through time, you're killing medieval zombies and stuff with a shotgun, but like make it off-brand Evil.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of Duke Nukem's Time to Kill, where Duke is like, what's that? PlayStation 1, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I played that one. It was like
it's quite like Tomb Raider. It has it's a the 3D, or so what do you call this? Over the shoulder? No, that's not it. I feel like such an idiot being a game designer and not coming up with this term immediately. But yeah, it's third person, and you're platforming a lot and everything. But the plot is basically, it's the most not woke plot of all time. It's the
and then we travel through time to save
the pig cops turn Duke's his strip club into a gay strip club, and he wants to go back in time to make it not gay. It's the most not. You couldn't do it today, but
yeah, that was.
But you go to the first level after the first city. Like you go back to like the Wild West, and then you're in the Roman Colosseum and all these different you're in future world, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and you're kind of carrying that same arsenal of weapons with you, and Duke just keeps changing costumes to fit in.
That would be a good idea for a light gun game, like pixel art. Okay, I was thinking originally doing it in sort of like, have you ever played
Ghouls and Ghosts? That is a throwback, but yes.
Okay, pixel art, cartoony, cheapy style, ghouls and ghosts style, medieval village. The medieval people are being attacked by the ghouls and ghosts like monsters. You've got like your giant suit of armor wearing demons. You've got like all these sort of classic ghouls and ghosts like monsters. Time vortex open. Legally distinct Ash Williams falls through with his gun. Right. There's your light gun game, right? You fire through, you go through to the castle, and then on the final level, dimensional vortex open, and they attack modern day New York City. And the final level is you on the back of a car shooting the demons flying through New York City, all pixel art. That'd be a pretty cool idea for a game. And I think I might make.
What I find interesting about all of these ideas that you have is, when it comes to light gun games, I don't think most people playing them really know what the story is at all. They're too immersed in the immediacy of shooting all the stuff to think about like, what am I actually doing here and what am I progressing towards? And your style of thinking about it is it's very cool. And I think that if you emphasize that, even with your whatever idea you go with, like a light gun game that genuinely has like a story that you're immersed in, is cool.
It's not about story. It's a theme. It's a setup. It's like You know, lethal enforcers, you're a cop, they're the bad guys, go shoot them. Time crisis, you're an agent, they're the bad guys, go shoot them. You know, Carnival, it's an evil circus, they're evil clowns, go shoot them. But it's a theme, and it's got to be bright, it's got to be colorful, and it's got to grab attention.
And you have to
You
progress.
know, you can't go back and forth.
The thing is that most people that have played every game that you just named, right? Most of the people that have ever played these things, they come up, they throw in 2 or 3, you know, whatever the quarter or token amount is. They play a little bit of it, you know, they have some fun, and that they don't really take in what the progression of that is, right? And then there's a few people that blew all their quarters and went play through the whole thing. And even then, they may not really know what the progression of that story was. They just, you know, I beat it, aha, I got the high score, that kind of thing. But when you're playing this stuff on, you know, on a console or a PC or whatever, and not on an arcade machine, you have a lot more leeway with, for, you know, as you said, story, but like not necessarily story, but just progressing through settings and really fleshing out the full idea of what those themes are.
I wouldn't put a story in my light gun games. Not really. To my mind, they should be like pure and simple. What you want to do is you want to have like memorable and catchy lines. So I don't know if you've ever played the original Time Crisis, like the very first one. I think it's one of the most quotable fucking games ever made. Like there is like 6 or 7 lines I can just off the top of my head just think of. Your father will pay the price for destroying the Imperial rule. You know, never mind, my men will gun him down. You know, be my guest and let me entertain you. Like, if anyone's ever played the original Time Crisis, you know all of those fucking lines and who said them. You want to be catchy. You don't want to bother have an actual plot. You want to have just like a series of really quotable, catchy moments. And that's what I want to aim for in my future games. I want all my games to be cheap, £2 or £3. I want most of the light gun games to be finished in like half a fucking hour, and I want them to be really rememberable. And that's what I'm going to aim for, and that's what I'm going to dedicate the rest of my game making life to, and the occasional FPS game.
I don't know. It's so cool how all these different genres, or whether it be FPS or RPG maker type stuff or light gun or whatever, you can just slap a theme on it and, you know, go wild with it. It's sort of like even with like theme parks or like just roller coasters. Like you could have the same roller coaster. Disney's done this a million times. Like basically the same thing, different setting, different theme. And you kind of stick to the same archetype, as you said. You know, this is the theme. Here's the bad guys, shoot them, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's weird how games condition you to sort of know what it is expected of you without saying so, right? So, like, Postal, for example, Postal 2, you know, it's infamously one of the. I'm actually going to be in an upcoming documentary about it. I'm interviewing the people that are making the documentary very soon, but. Quick plug to Tad and Jason and all those guys, and to Mike Jared. Fuck you, Mike Jared. But no, I just mean like the design of the game is such that you start off in this, you know, shooter game, and it gives you a gun, and everybody's mean to you and shit, and then you just start shooting people because you know that's what you're supposed to do. But you actually don't have to do that, and if you don't pull the trigger, no one will attack you. It's on you, the player. It's like a trick that they play on the player to get you into doing it. But it's just like, how much does it take, you know, just very subtly to get someone to, like, in a video game, walk up, pick up a gun, and just start shooting civilians? Nothing. It's like very little prompt actually needs to take place. It's just be annoying.
You know, I hate meta, but like, what sort of person's going to play Postal? Like, you got into that knowing what you were going to do. The game's called Postal. Like, it's it's a series of elimination. Like, my mum wouldn't have played Postal, and she wouldn't have shot anyone if she was playing Postal. But the person who would buy Postal or play Postal is the sort of person who would shoot up a virtual school.
I was credited in Postal Brain Damage for. I basically was like part of releasing the original trailer for it when it was going to come out and everything, and I showed this to my whole family. I'm like, oh, look at this! Isn't this really cool? And my grandma was like, this looks terrible. This is awful. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's true. This is pretty awful. But as you said, it takes nothing, and you sort of know what you're getting yourself into. But then again, it's like, what does that say about people? That you just pick up a gun and start shooting in a video game?
No, it's good. And like I said, a series of elimination. You wouldn't be there in the first place if you weren't going to do that. But I've always been a firm believer that you can do whatever the hell you want in media. Like, I've done terrible things in the world of video gaming, and I would be a multiple war criminal if it was real. So,
it's easy in Quartermain because the bad guys are, cultists and zombies and monsters and fucking, like Nazis.
they're Nazis,
Kill them
kill them
all.
all.
Let God sort them out.
I was going to say, were you the one that got pushed out the train because you didn't shoot the SS officer
Yeah.
who confronts you? I assumed you would shoot him.
So you made the assumption I would shoot him.
Right there, you have a gun.
He doesn't aggress me. He doesn't do anything to me. So I'm like,
I just assumed everyone would shoot him. He's an SS officer. He deserves to die.
maybe he's like what was the Rudolph Hess character? Maybe he was just about to, he's taken this train to get to Scotland to tell everybody Hitler's plan before the end of the war. Maybe he's
can't see inside this man's soul.
Maybe that's the feminine part of me. Is like, maybe I can tame him. The Beauty and the Beast kind of trope.
Yeah, it's it's.
Do you have any?
Right.
I don't know, just like general advice that you would give to somebody who dreams of making video games and hasn't done it yet?
Yeah. Okay. So I have two different bits of advice. One, if you don't think you can code, an Easy FPS Editor and you want to make an FPS game, Easy FPS Editor is a great way to make an FPS game. If you want to make an arcade shooter, use Shmuck Creator. If you want to make anything story-based and you don't want to learn to code, the easiest way is probably RPG Maker. But I don't entirely recommend that because there's 20 million RPG Maker games and no one's going to play them. If you want to learn something a bit more complex, go to Sierra Construct 2 or GDevelop. Or Construct Free if you're willing to pay a subscription. Anything beyond that is going to be more complex, and you're going to have to put a lot more time, effort, and study into it. Any other bits of advice? Back up constantly. Whenever you're doing, back up everything. Because you never know when something's going to crash, and then you're going to lose progress. It happens to everyone all the time. And make friends. Oh my God, I've made it this far and we haven't even talked about it. Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah. Make friends with other people in the community. I have been utterly blessed, and I cannot fucking believe I've gone this far without mentioning it. And he's going to listen to this, and he's going to hate me for not mentioning it up to now. I have a music German. His name's Michael. He is fucking
not an SS officer, just German.
He's a music guy, but he does all the music, and he does it for free, and it's really fucking good music. Make friends with people because you never know if you're going to find an incredibly talented person who doesn't value their own work, so you can abuse them. That's so important. I have offered him money, but he hasn't taken it for some reason. Yeah, make friends, talk to people, help other people who don't know how to make games because you never know when you can use them. That sounds far more abusive than I meant to, but it is actually really usul advice.
And it can be beneficial to both parties. That's another.
Yeah, it's beneficial to both. Like, I can't write very well, but I was helping someone called Tim, and he was like, I will go over your script, and he fixed the script up for me. Done it free of charge because I helped him learn the game. Socializing with other game developers is incredibly important. Yeah, and I know you're kind of wrapping up the podcast now, and we've been going on for a long time, and we've talked about everything but the game, and that's my fault mostly. But you've got to admit that soundtrack that you've been hearing so far is.
I love the soundtrack.
Good, right?
It's one of the first notes that I took was like, who made this soundtrack? It's really, really.
He's doing it for free. Yeah. So yeah, just talk to people. You can't have mine, but talk to other people, and see if you can use other people. And yeah, he's so good. He's so fucking good. Yeah, I need to give him some money. I do. I think whenever I make so much money in the game, I'm just going to take a big wad of it and just hand it to him because that's a fucking great soundtrack.
Yeah, man. I think that's like really, really the best advice you could give anyone who want. I know I've known so many game developers. Well, I'm not going to say wannabe. That's so mean. Would be game developers who try to do it in a vacuum, and I'm like, just don't be afraid to ask people for help. you will be blown away by how nice people are and are willing to just like help you figure out how to do stuff, because chances are they were in the same boat at some point. And you will be better and your
And
product
that's
will be
it.
better for having exchanged ideas with other people. That is so true.
And that said, I will give a small bit of contradictory advice. If there is something you had your heart set on and your game is coming towards completion, don't be afraid to splurge out on something if you need to. I really wanted German voice acting for the anime. I loved the yelling and screaming of the Germans in the Wolfenstein remakes. I love the angry German noises when you're like an alarm goes off and you hear like a load of what to me is incomprehensible gibberish, but screaming over the
I
alarms.
love
I
your
love that.
Wilhelm. You use
So
the
I
Wilhelm
went out.
scream a lot in the game too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I include the little home screen because that's copyright free. But in the newer versions, we need to really balance that audio so you can hear it clearer. But all the Germans are screaming actual German, and I went to Fiverr and then I paid out to get an actual German voice actor. Another bit of advice: if you're going to do that, expect to haggle. They will have one price listed on the front, and they will try and get you to pay 5 times as much. Haggle them down. Okay, because those fuckers are not going to ask for the price they listed on the front page.
I have
Um,
another counter piece of advice to that. If you want German and voice actors,
yeah,
take the train to Germany, go to a bar, any bar, on a Friday around 2 p.m. and start talking to people. Have a voice recorder with you. Mention that you need some Nazis in your game or whatever it is. Like you need this or that. People are just willing to help. Like people, it's amazing how much people like just want to be part of stuff. Like we have one of our games, Call of Seregnar, features a lot of like Renaissance fair goers, like people who would typically be, hanging out at these sorts of things, and they're dressed up in like these medieval costumes and everything. And you'd be surprised that even for like a really small prices and stuff, like, hey, would you be willing to pose for some photos, and be in a video game? And like people are like, oh, that sounds amazing. We'd love that, like don't be afraid to just like literally, people will go out of their way to do stuff like that. It's really, really fun and it's beneficial to everyone. All you have to do is credit them and say like, hey, if you're looking for people who can do costume stuff or convention work and that kind of thing, like, contact this number or this website. So you just never know, man. You never know.
I don't. I don't know if you have a time limit to wrap this up
I
by,
don't.
but I another tangent came up for more advice. If I can do that.
Keep going, man. Yeah, we got all day.
Cool. Okay, more advice. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you can't draw. Learning how to draw is the most useful skill in the entire fucking world for game development. Because if you want to do something, you can just do it. And drawing when you can't draw, I couldn't draw that well for the longest time. Is admittedly fucking hard. You have to study and practice. It's not easy. I'll admit that. But don't be afraid to trace, right? A lot of my NPCs, I did kind of just Google like German beer hall guy, and I would find a photograph and I kind of traced it. Probably shouldn't say that, but if you're doing pixel art, no one's gonna fucking know, except the fact that I just told you. But also a lot of my weapons, like the big Falkensturm, which is actually it's a reference to Michael, the music guy's game. He's making his own shmup with Falkensturm that's looking fucking amazing. But it's my heavy machine gun. It's actually it's the machine gun from Doom, the Doom Eternal, maybe it was the Doom remake. It's that machine gun, but I drew over it, changed it enough to make it a different thing. But I needed that basic sprite to get the idea of where the gun would go on an image, what which direction it's pointing in. Don't be afraid to trace if you need to. And another bit of advice: if you're not a pixel artist and you want wall textures, go everywhere with a camera and start taking photos of walls. Because I've done that in my earlier games, and it doesn't actually look that bad. Just using your own
Oh yeah.
photos for
That's
wall
really good
textures.
advice. I've got a few friends that are like texture artists and level designers and such, and they will like, we're traveling around and just they'd have a camera with them or their phone or whatever, and just like see an interesting building, walking through like wherever, Denmark, Amsterdam, whatever. Just, oh, I really like the brick layout here, and they just start snapping pictures of it, like how I'm going to use this. I'm like, that's super cool. That's really good advice. Just using things around you, architecture around you, whatever, that's all stuff that could just go into the the soup, the perpetual soup of your idea for a game or whatever it may be.
Okay, more advice. Set deadlines for God's sake. My games, like, I have a horrible tendency to work on games forever, and they never ever finish. And I know, and then I get friends who want to see the game finished, and then they stop being my friends and stop messaging me because they get fed up of asking me how the game's going. And I go, I'm working on something else now. I'm working on something else now. I'm working on something else now. Set deadlines for God's sake. In fact, if you can get a publisher, I hate to say it because I kind of wish I'd self-published. Not because Sam's amazing. The Postman games are great, but I wanted to prove to myself that I could self-publish, and I wasn't able to do it because I was too fucking tired. But I did kind of need the publisher because the publisher sets deadlines, and for God's sake, set yourself a deadline. Otherwise, you'll work.
They also set you up with media appearances and do lots of things. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's try and get a publisher. Another bit of advice because they do all the boring stuff like setting things up. Other bits of advice. Don't judge yourself to other people. Like, have you ever heard of two-cake theory?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, holy fuck, someone's made two cakes, as opposed to like, oh, his cake is better than mine. The theory is that don't compare your cake to someone else because to someone else it means it's now suddenly two cakes. I looked at Satan that came out and I went, oh, it looks better than mine. Oh no, it's terrible. And Steve, shut the fuck up. Your game is very different. You're not exactly the same. You may be making the same engine, but you're going for a completely different feel. Right? They don't look the same. They don't play the same. It's fine. It's fine. Stop comparing. Two cake theory. You know? Try not to hate everything you do, which is a problem for me because I hate everything I do. I look at my own work and I see all my flaws. Always.
I always on that note, it's like don't be afraid to just like fucking just put something out there. Like I've known tremendous amounts of game developers who are that sort of perpetual perfectionist, like what you were talking about earlier. Like I've started a lot of things and never finished anything, sort of thing, or whatever. And it's just like it's okay to just like publish like not the best game in the world and do that like 10 times. I've probably said this so many times on the podcast, but it's some of the best advice I could ever give. Period. Is people ask John Romero something like what about your early work like Wolfenstein and Doom and Commander Keen and Quake, and then he would say something like those Wolfenstein 3D was my 87th game, and it's true. Like that's 100% fact. Just make stuff. Just put it out there. You don't, even if it's like not the best thing in the world, you could be making money that's going towards you then making your masterpiece later. It's not like the statue of David was Michelangelo's, first thing he did.
I don't know. With this, I've got one other more controversial bit of advice, and I don't know if this is correct per se, but sometimes it's okay to quit on a project. Like sometimes it is okay if you feel like it's not coming together to just stop signing into the sunk cost factory job. Like if you like, there's a game I made called Omega Wing. It is a shmup made in Shmup Creator, and no one cared. And I made 4 or 5 levels in it, and I cannot stress the fact that no one gave a fuck. And I don't necessarily think it's in, but after I made like my 4th level and no one downloaded it, I was like, I'm just gonna stop. I'm just like, clearly no one cares about this game. I'm just gonna stop doing that. Sometimes it is why finishing a game is good. If there's still a fuck ton left to do and no one cares, sometimes it is best to stop. Don't follow trends. Another bit of advice. Don't try and make things that are popular because you'll just make same as everything else. Find what you like and try and do exactly the game that you want. And I think that is my last bit of advice. Don't follow trends. Don't try and be like everyone else. Do your thing, and other people will like it. Hopefully, it may not sell 1 billion copies, but
you also, just because you're not initially successful, you'd never know when somebody might pick it up later and find that it's their favorite thing ever.
I know we're contradicting my previous advice about not giving up on games, But the Omega Win thing wasn't really a passion project. I was just sort of like kind of doing that because I wanted to make something in Shmup Creator.
Or even, giving up on it is one thing, but just agreeing that now is not the time. And then you may be 10 years later where you're like, man, I had a great idea for that thing and I never really fleshed it out. And now it could be, I've seen it happen where I now have the inspiration, or I've learned a new skill, or the technology has just now occurred and been made available that allows something like this. Even as something as like, I really want to make an FPS game, but I don't know how to code. And then later on, someone makes an easy FPS maker. And now that's available to you, changes the whole dynamic as opposed to, back in the day when you had to write everything from scratch yourself. Or you might just meet the right collaborator. Like somebody might contact you after this podcast. I don't know, and say, hey, I'm a whippersnapper programmer and I'm looking to, help somebody make this kind of stuff. Maybe I could fix that audio issue for you. I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like
ever since I've got into Easy FPS, I've had so many people just message me out the blue. It happens all the fucking time. It's got a great little community. That said, the Discord could be a rather place because there's no moderation. So if you ask too many questions, I'll tell you to fuck off and read the manual. But I have had a lot of close friends that I've made. And shout out to Emil because he's going to be listening to this. Shout out to, I'm going to just list up a bunch of names. Luggage, Michael,
Mom. Mom.
Every Plum Dog, Pixel Wolf, everyone who's from the community. Shout out. Yeah. And if you didn't get mentioned, I don't care about you.
I'm going to be getting keys for, I think, all of the other DOSman games too. So I'll probably, get quite a few different, familiarities and connections within this community. And that's going to be interesting too. And I want to have Sam on. So Sam, peer pressure, you have to be on the show.
Yeah, I can tell you what, play Reverend and get my dear friend Emil on. Because he's tried to do his own sort of version of Blood. It's a damn fine little game. And Emil is one of the nicest men I've ever met. So,
make that connection, man. Just like make us a little group chat or have him get me on Discord, email address or whatever, and I'll make it happen.
Fantastic. Good.
Was there anything else you wanted to cover today?
Right. No, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. If anyone out there hasn't tried tabletop gaming, it's really fucking fun. Try my game. It's a passion project. That's Quartermain and the Cult of Cthulhu.
Wishlist today. Wishlist it right now.
March. Yeah. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. So it's basically kind of like a Doom sort of thing. It's got that whole kind of inspired by tabletop gaming angle. The voice acting, fair warning, is going to be a little bit amateur, but there's a reason for that. It's voice acted by the players from the game itself. They're all just a bunch of guys I knew and played the game with. Okay, so that's why the voice acting for the main character and his two compatriots you talk throughout the game is going to be a little weak, but keep in mind these are tabletop gamers, not voice actors. Yeah. Other bits of random life advice. Take up painting. It's a fun hobby and very relaxing. Watch some Bob Ross. He's fucking amazing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, never, ever do night shift. Ever. Under any circumstances. Ever. Yeah.
It's been really good, spending some time getting to know you and talking about the game, testing it. I'm still going to be playing it. I'll probably have beat it long before it hits the rest of the world. And I'm hoping to get that final build whenever you're ready to.
Yeah,
so if there's anything I can do to help, let me know.
Well, I sincerely hope whenever I complete my next project, whatever it is, you'll have me on again to talk about it. I would very much like that. I'm hoping it's something arcadey that we can talk about together. And yeah, excellent. Peace out, I guess.
I know what you're thinking. I thought you said you were done with boomer shooters. Like, well, I mean, come on. Yeah, just thank you very much to Steven for coming on the show, man. It's really cool. And thanks to Sam Marshall for putting us together. Make sure you go and wishlist Quartermain and the Cult of Cthulhu. It's coming out in March, but the Steam page is already up. Make sure you show some love and go ahead and I mean, it's only a few bucks, like literally like $3 for most of their stuff. So DOSman Games on Steam. If you're following the Steam page to Quartermain, you'll see it right there under the Publisher tab, and just grab everything they have. Why not? Good stuff. Thank you to all of our wonderful supporters on Patreon. Big ups to Shannon, Ant, Michael, Fred, and Brad. And of course, as always, the theme song to this show is by John of the Shred. So check out everything he does over at Scythe Dev Team. I love you. God love you. Stay in the keep.